समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
This is one of those unusual episodes of Cut the Clutter where we combine the usual fare of Cut the Clutter with opinion, with a fair degree or dollop of opinion. And this has been sparked by something that Vice President of India, Jagdeep Dhankhar, very eminent lawyer and politician, he has said. He said just the other day that the whip system in our democracy, in our parliamentary system should be done away with. What is the whip system? The whip system, as I'm sure all of you smart people know, is when the party says, okay, there will be vote in parliament on this issue. We are now issuing a whip that everybody will vote on this the side of this issue, for this law or against this law, for this motion or against this motion. That's why every party has a chief whip who issues this order. That is the whip system. Many parliaments have it. However, many of the modern parliaments do not have it. What this does is this makes our inner party democracy really weak. So this is something which I had also written about, not now, but about 8 years back, 9 years back. And that national interest was headlined Democracy by Danda. Democracy by Danda, because I had said that's how our politics is, with no inner party democracy, right? That is the reason now we should listen to Jagdeep Dhankhar, and our view on this, our editorial view, was stated in this 50-word edit, which you will see on your screens. So read that edit. The whip system actually, in some ways, in fact, more than in some ways, fundamentally undermines our democracy. This was linked to the anti-defection law, which means people who are in one party can vote only one way, and if they defy the party whip and vote the other way, then that is a violation of the party whip, and thereby they are subject to anti-defection law and will lose their seats. This was meant to put every party's legislators into that party's straitjacket. Now, the reason I wrote this national interest when I wrote it was because Hilary Benn was a Labour MP at that point in the House of Commons. He made a speech, and I said then, and I'm repeating it now, we should listen to Jagdeep Dhankhar now as much as I had then said we should listen to Hilary Benn. Now the fact is that Hilary Benn was not even such a prominent British parliamentarian. In fact, I had said that if you ask even a well-informed fellow Indian who Hilary Benn is, you will most likely draw a blank. Labour Party, British Labour Party, you may say Jeremy Corbyn, he's out for now. You can say Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister now, but Hilary Benn, not likely anybody would have known him then or would know him now. Because these are, in any case, very insular, inward-looking times. Britain, anyways, is a declining power along with the old class of Indian Anglophiles. It may be worthwhile, therefore, to Google him and listen to his 13-minute speech in the House of Commons in December 2015. And this was on the use of air power against ISIS in Syria. I will also share a link of this speech with you. It is a stirring speech. A senior Labour MP, in fact, the shadow Foreign Secretary then, making the case for bombings, even justifying it in terms of both an obligation for fellow European socialists, François Hollande's government in France, and as part of Labour's commitment to internationalism. But more stirring is the way his parliament responded in Britain on both sides of the ideological divide. Initially, then Prime Minister David Cameron fidgeted uncomfortably and grimaced when Hilary Benn upbraided him over his rude criticism of Jeremy Corbyn, then the radical Labour leader. Hilary Benn was indirectly attacking in his speech, in fact, because Corbyn was opposed to voting in favour of the motion to carry out bombings over ISIS sites in Syria. Hilary Benn then made a passionate call to arms against ISIS, who he called the new fascists, and reminded the House in conclusion that when he finishes, he will return to the side of the House opposing the motion to approve the use of offensive air power in Syria, but is urging all MPs to vote for the government's motion. You get my point. His party was voting against the motion, but he was giving a call to defy the party's whip and to vote in favor of the motion, which is what he was going to do. That motion was carried by a large majority in the end, a majority of 174, more significant than the conservative majority that made it a done deal anyway because conservatives had a safe majority. More significant than that was the fact that 66 Labour MPs voted in support, crossing their party line. Unlike what would have happened in India. That's the reason I had used this example then, and that's the reason I'm bringing back this example now. Again, unlike India, nothing happened to these British Labour MPs. They continue to be Labour MPs. But in India, they would have attracted punishment or disqualification under anti-defection laws. Labour Party had internal disagreements on this issue, and respecting these, the party allowed open voting other than enforce a whip. I'll take you back to something that happened in India, in fact, much before the anti-defection law came in. This is post-1969, as Mrs. Gandhi was splitting the Congress, a new presidential election was to be held. The Congress Party, the original Congress Party or Congress O as it was called, Congress Organization, Old Congress, they were fielding Neelam Sanjeeva Reddy as the Congress candidate. Indira Gandhi decided to field her own candidate. Her own candidate was VV Giri. Now the Congress Party, which had large number of MPs, and you know the presidential electoral college is very complex, they had issued a whip for their party to vote in favor of Neelam Sanjeeva Reddy. Mrs. Gandhi, on the other hand, gave a call to vote based on your conscience, and enough people cut across the party lines from the Congress Party, defied the whip, and voted alongside her, and that's how VV Giri became President of India. At that point, they could not be expelled because there was no anti-defection law. Anti-defection law came much later, and we'll come to that. In fact, there are many points for us in India to note from this British experience, going back to this British 2015 December experience. British politics is no less polarized than ours. Yet the main opposition party then, which is now the ruling party, the main opposition party then allowed open voting on a divisive issue, underlining the strength of that party's internal democracy. It is impossible in India. It's been impossible in India for decades now, for more than 5 decades now. All parties are now dictatorships of their high commands or supremos, and forget relaxing the whip. Even if a party MP praises a policy or personality of the other side, it is seen as high treason. Moments of bipartisan solidarity are rare in our parliament. We see these in times of war, terror attacks, natural calamities, and sometimes in pursuit of a high common ideal, like the defense of conventional politics when under a vicious attack from Anna Hazare. There are also debates where old divisions persist, but the level of discourse can be top-notch. We saw flashes of this in Constitution Day debates, and my favorites of all times are the two debates on secularism when Atal Bihari Vajpayee's government faced confidence motions in 1996 and 1999. But all that is very different from MPs being able to act like public representatives with minds of their own rather than obedient, unquestioning, unflinching followers of the party whip. Just last week, we saw yet another example. In American parliamentary system also, there is no whip. So senators, Congress people can vote based on what they have, what they feel on a particular issue. We've just seen Lisa Murkowski, who is a Republican Party senator, announce first of all that she is going to vote against the appointment of Peter Hegseth, who is Donald Trump's choice as his Secretary of Defense. So what I tell you about debates in India, where MPs can cut across party lines on some issues, that is very different from MPs being able to act like public representatives with minds of their own rather than obedient, unquestioning, unflinching followers of the party whip. You cannot see a Hillary Benz speech like in the House of Commons in Indian Parliament, nor can you see a Senator Liza Murakovsky kind of open defiance of a presidential choice for Secretary of Defense. There are only 3 places where our MPs, Indian MPs, can still manage to be themselves and not party robots. The first 2 are Parliament Central Hall, which is now gone, right? So I have to say the first two used to be Parliament Central Hall. Now there is something like a Central Hall, but not quite a Central Hall. And the second is the New Delhi after hours party circuit, where deals are cut and rivalries or enmities go into suspended animation. That also is happening less and less now. The third is parliamentary committees. These are the only forums where MPs can afford to voice their own individual opinions. I have testified at some and can vouch for the high quality of questioning, showing great homework by the MPs. Many of their reports are quite brilliant, laden with great data, many of their reports are quite brilliant, laden with great data and analysis. You can never tell which MP was for or against these final recommendations, as there is no voting. How does such a bitterly divided polity still keep on producing such consensus? One reason, sadly, is that these parliamentary institutions are not open to public or media coverage, which in principle is such a pity. But in practice, it's a blessing. If it was open to public and media coverage, would any Indian MP dare to go against the party's stated position? These will become like those TV so-called debates in the prime time. Today, it is quite common for members to weigh in against their party positions in these committees. Although this phenomenon is now weakening, we see less and less of this, particularly from the ruling party, but still it is something that happens. When the UPA was in power, for example, some Congress MPs on the respective committees opposed both the pension bill then and increase in foreign direct investment in insurance. Those are ideas, those were decisions of the Vajpayee government with which Congress party supported in principle and in parliament, but in parliamentary committees, some of the MPs went against the party position and opposed both reforms. That's why I say parliamentary committees are a very important, significant forum where MPs are not bound by the party whip and they function quite healthily. We fret that our parliamentary system is broken. Sometimes too few laws are passed, and when there is a majority, too many laws are passed, all with too little debate. The power to stop legislation through what is called halla, pandemonium, that much loved expression in Indian media, is exercised as often as the arrogance to railroad legislation through halla. In the United States, senators employ the filibuster to block bills. In India, MPs jump into the well of the House, even throw things at each other and sometimes at the Speaker, just to seek an adjournment. Parties propose laws when in power but oppose them once out, and vice versa. We editorialists can keep calling it hypocrisy. People continue to lose faith in their representatives, but nothing moves. How, for example, would our parliament have handled a discussion of the kind in British Parliament on bombing the ISIS hideouts in Syria? Besides blaming each other for causing the crisis, even if the opposition did not want to block the resolution, it would probably have staged a walkout. It is time, therefore, to take a fresh look at the anti-defection law and the whip system. And that's why it's time to listen to Vice President Jagdeep Dhankhar. He's raised a very good point at a very, very vital juncture in our history. If parties started allowing people to speak and vote on important issues, at least on some issues, not all, at least on some issues, without the fear of anti-defection law, our parliament will get both better and more productive. So will Indian politics, where the greatest shame now is the total absence of inner party democracy. The Congress destroyed its own institutions, including the Congress Working Committee, which is fully nominated and rarely meets, and the Bharatiya Janata Party, under the new dispensation, has headed that way. In fact, it's almost got there. Most of the other parties, with the exception of the communist parties, are now political mafias owned by dynasties. or anti-defection law as it is now employed is their ally. This should change. Then maybe we will also see a Right Honorable bench-style principle breaking of the ranks, even in defiance of the current party leader. That said, once again, we have to say thank you to Jagdeep Dhankhar for bringing back this issue in the debate.